Good morning, Raven Ridge Forge, Raven Ridge Knives. Um, February, Montana. It's not warm, but it's not super duper cold, so that's cool. It's a nice day to do some forging. Some of our previous videos I've showed you the end results. Um, what I do is I'll forge out a bunch of blanks. I call them blanks, knife shapes, whatever you want to call them. Um, and then start working them through the process. So I'll forge for a day, do 40, 50, 60 knives, and then I will spend the rest of the month or 2 months, whatever it is it takes to finish them up and make them nice looking blades like we have in some of the other videos and stuff. So today we're going to start that process out. I am not a master smith. My grandfather taught me how to make tractor parts on a coal forge and an anvil, heat treating, tempering, which cross paths with making knives, you know, strong enough to hold its shape, um, soft enough to bend and flex when it needed to be, and still be able to perform as it will. So like I said earlier in the other videos and stuff like that there, um, the knife making process is very similar to other blacksmithing and or functional parts that you need to do. Um, Not a master smith, so I don't have all the blacksmith stuff. I have an anvil, I got a coal forge. We use just bags of coal from Tractor Supply. May not be the best coal for it, but it works. I've seen guys use the smaller rice stuff, which seems to look like it might be better. Um, this works for me. I'm one of them type people, if it ain't broke, I don't fix it. So I just got a bunch of hammers from different places. A lighter hammer, I think this one is 2.5. This one is close to 3, and then this one is up at 4. This one has a nice edge on it. I've been working on to get my certain different things in it. Flattening, it seems to work well for that there. Again, not a master smith. We're going to start to forge up here shortly, so we'll show you that. Okay, so in the forging process, you can take a ball bearing or a thick half-inch chunk of steel or a square chunk of steel and draw that out to the shape of a knife or whatever you need. I consider that true forging, and again, this is my personal opinion. It may vary throughout the forging blacksmith community. Aluminum, to get a consistent shape and size. Consistency makes the rest of the process real easy. Yeah, you can take a piece of steel, bang it out, make a knife shape, make a one-off knife type thing. But in what we've been doing is selling a lot of the utility size knives and stuff like that. They're smaller knives and stuff. For able to get a consistent fit into the sheaths and the handle material and stuff like that there, having a template. So this is just a piece of aluminum. It's easy to shape. I start out with a piece of wood sometimes to work with a shape. If I'm working on a new shape or something, I'll start out with a piece of wood, shape that out, and get my dimensions rather than going through the process of just banging a piece of steel out and saying, yeah, this is cool. Piece of wood. If I like that shape, then I'll go to a template of aluminum. It makes it easy. Now, this bar of steel, I make knives in 3 different ways. One, I would consider forging. Like I said, taking a piece of steel, drawing it out, making a knife. Taking this piece of steel and making a knife, I consider forging because I'm going to use heat and a hammer to make that shape out of this. Stock removal. I could trace this over and just cut it out to that shape. Not forging. I'm just tracing it out and doing that there. And like I said, recently we bought some water jet knives from a guy that we bought a lot of equipment from that, you know, long story short is he wanted to sell everything in one lump sum. So we ended up with like 500, 600, 800 blanks, which we're going to have to turn into knives because hopefully it'll get some of our money back for the equipment. No forging process in that there, and I think I discussed it in one of the other videos of I do think that that's a plus and a bonus and a minus of, you know, different things here and there. You know, it's all comes down to your, what do you want? Do you want a nice quality knife, or do you want a hand forged knife that was forged out? End result, I could show you 3 knives. You would never see the differences whether it was water jetted, stock removal, or forged. It's just a matter of being hand forged. And when I say it that way, it's sort of like I get confused on what's the importance of hand forging. But I enjoy the process of forging. Again, getting a little bit older and stuff like that there, you know, I have to take a day or two off after forging for a whole day making a bunch of knives. So after this here, we'll get the forge fired up. We'll try to put some words in there in between there, because once the fans are running and stuff like that there, it'd be hard to hear me on the video. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard it many, many times before. Forging is a process of heat, beat, and repeat. It's heats, moving the steel to where you want it and stuff like that there. I'll try to describe some of it. The fans aren't too loud. I have a fan on this here, so this type of coal needs continuous fans on it. Little small squirrel cage on there running it out. And then I got a ventilation fan. That side's completely open. Nice tall building. Not too bad. I am going to build an exhaust fan at some point in time, just to get the air out of here when it's hot in the summertime and stuff like that there. So this first heat, I'm just going to heat it up. Coal gets very, very hot very quick. You have to be cautious that you don't overheat the steel. Overheating the steel can cause it to be no good anymore. You can literally turn it into a sparkler, where you put it in there, get it too hot and pull it out and it's just a sparkler, no good. So we'll work in sections, starting from the tip to the butt of the handle. Say, in my opinion, I think, you know, the tip is probably the hardest part, because you're drawing it down from a square to the point. The dreaded fish lips is some of the harder parts to get out. It's just a matter of keeping it smaller hits. You don't have to start wailing on it. You know, the whole anvil and hammer and full body blows and stuff like that there. A lot of the delicate work of detailed work and stuff like that there, as far as bladesmithing and ornamental blacksmithing, you're just tapping on it to move it in that general direction. You don't want to wail on it and start folding steel over. Folding steel over is a cold shut, start of a crack type thing that you don't want. And keeping your steel plenty warm enough is a difficult thing when it's a little bit cooler out. It is a process. So as I'm beating on this, I'm slowly working the point in without folding this edge over, causing those fish lips. So I'm just going to slowly start working that out, slowly, slowly, slowly. Beat, beat, and repeat. So we're getting closer and closer to that pointier tip and stuff like that there. For this video here, I am going to be forging out a little bit more to shape than I normally do. You'd be surprised how much hammer strikes can be replicated or fixed in the grinding process. But for the sakes of the people out there that say you know, you didn't hand forge your knife, or you don't know how to hand forge a knife or something like that there, we will be drawing this one out a little bit further to above the 75-85% by hand. You can see we're starting to get there. Hammering will cause the steel to move out in equal directions all around, but sort of like hammering a nail straight down on. If it starts to twist a little bit, you kind of aim that nail back to straight. You're doing the same thing in moving steel. You're manipulating the way the hammer lays on there to move the steel in the direction that you want to. Okay, we're starting to get the tip down to where we need to. We're a little bit larger, oversized, and that's where I want to be. I will grind into where I need to be, but we're going to start working down the blade a little bit more. So this next heat, we're going to start working on this area where the handle is. At the end of the blade and the handle starts, we're going to start putting this shape in, leaving this up high enough. Okay, so this one here, we're going to start working back the handle, start coming out this little bit wider section. Okay, so we're at the point now where we're just going to start refining the shape a little bit better and then head to the grinding process. Okay, so now we'll hot cut this end off, and for the forging part, we'll kind of be done with that there. I'll do a little bit of straightening out and stuff like that there with it to get it flat, and then we'll go to the grinder to refine the shape. And this part here for chiseling, I need 3 hands, so Brandon's going to step in.
Flip it over.
And be careful not to step on your hot pieces of steel. I am going to refine the end a little bit more, so we will show that part too.
Rolling.
Okay, so the hot cutting process smushes the steel down into a pinch point. I leave it much longer because then I'll take that off in the grinding process and it'll be even thickness. So as you can see, I'm much longer than I need to be, which will be fine. Grinding next. This is the end of the forging process. So straightening it out, we'll stick it in a jig that I made. We'll just get it as straight as possible as that we can, so for grinding and stuff it makes it easier. Okay, here's what she looks like after forging. I don't have my wire brush in here. So, relatively straight, relatively knife shape. From here we'll go to the grinding and refine that process. Okay, so I actually started doing some grinding on the part before the camera guy showed up. Refining the point a little bit, double checking our size. We are well over our sizes and everywhere. Like I said, to get rid of the hot cut part, I leave a little extra tab there to grind off and stuff like that there. We got a little bit extra on the top. And this is the part that I was telling you about perfection. I mean, if you look at that, it looks similar to this. But when it comes to fitting in a sheath, this is much bigger. So we'll just refine that shape a little bit more on the grinder. And we'll do that very shortly here. We'll do some flat grinding and we'll do some 2D grinding, and then we'll get into the bevel. Okay, so at this point in time is where you would decide if you wanted to leave some forge marks in it or not. We are not going to be leaving them in, so I'm going to continue to sand a little bit further to get rid of a couple more, and then we'll go to the 2D outside shape. Okay, so at this point in time, we have a nicer finish on it. It's shiny. We'll continue to refine that shininess a little bit and stuff like that there. Now we're going to work on the 2D shape where it fits our design that we have in mind that we want to make today. So we'll be taking a little bit off there, some off there, and definitely a lot off there. Okay. Really super close to our two-dimensional shape or our profile shape. We're going to do the bevel. and then we'll go to the other shop and I'll show you where we'll be drilling holes and stuff like that there, getting it ready for heat treat. Drilling holes first, very important. Makes it much easier to drill through the softened steel than it is the hardened steel. But we'll put the bevel on it, we'll do some edge work on this one, and we'll also be putting a lanyard in this one. Okay, so edge beveling is one of the more difficult processes and stuff like that there. So as we did seen with the template, we left it a little bit wider because as I bevel, it'll come to a point and then you'll start losing some of that there, but then I'll have the ability to straighten it back up and leave it a little bit thicker for the heat treating process. But I start out pretty steep angle, get to where I'm close to the center point, and then sanding or grinding, belt grinding, you flat, but then you put more pressure on the bottom. That'll start drawing my bevel up higher where I like it. I like it at least over half anyway. Okay, so this side is really close to being done, and then we'll repeat it on the other side. Here's where attention to detail and all that stuff kind of plays into the end result of how the blade looks. I think the more even it is, the more appealing it is, and the more... So handmade for me is I try to make it look machine made, but with a hand, and that's the cool part. I mean, I can make a prison shank looking thing that's a knife, it's sharp, it works well, but the closer that you can get to machine made, handmade is better, I think. I'm not really sure on that part. So a lot of different things I've seen out there for beveling. Sort of like instinctive archery shooting. You don't have all the gadgets and stuff like that there to make sure you're doing it right. You just have to hold it right, do it right, watch what you're doing, and refine your process of doing it once, twice, 10, 15, 100 times. I think freehanding is better. There are tons and tons of videos out there of jigs and other ways to bevel. Again, self-taught. This is how I learned to do it. It's probably not the easiest way to do it, I know, but it's the way I was taught to do it. Again, leaving the height a little bit more on there. We get down to sharper, pointier parts, a little bit flatter parts and stuff like that there. We'll refine that again when we do this side. And then I will come back and drop all that down so that when I heat treat, I don't have a real sharp edge that will overheat. And then when I clean it up, I'll come back to that sharper point for the edge. Okay, so now that we have them relatively even, there's some oddities up here on the flat spot. We're going to reflatten them off. And I don't go down to perfect because after heat treating, I'm going to have to clean it back up again. This is 80 grit. It's forgot to mention earlier that it's always easier to do your bevels on a new belt. So I'll use my newer belts for bevels, and then I'll go to some of my older belts and stuff like that there for flattening and different things like that there. But a brand new belt or a relatively new belt works best for beveling. So we'll clean that piece up a little bit. We'll do that here. Then we'll go over, we'll drill our holes, we'll do our edge work, and then we'll go to heat treating. Okay, so we have our profile done, our bevel done, our flattening done, and stuff like that there. Super close to the shape that we wanted, which will still fit into the sheath. And good, bad, or ugly, whatever you want to call it, the handmade knives are all slightly different. As close to the same as we can get them, but all have their own little fingerprint and their own little thing. Earlier I talked about a wooden one. So I do start out with a wooden shape, and then like I said, if I like that shape, then I will go to a more durable one for forging. You lay a hot piece of steel on the wood, it melts, it burns, it goes away. So from here now, what we'll be doing is we'll do with our drilling, and then we'll go to heat treat.
And some edge work.
And we'll do file work as well. Okay, so at this point I kind of put a mark on there where my handle is going to be at. You can go through the measuring and all that stuff to get it exactly perfect. I do a lot of eyeballing and measuring with my mind instead of a ruler. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But we're going to be putting 3/16 inch pins in, so these bits are slightly oversized a little bit. That gives it a little bit more of an ease for putting the pins in. It's not as difficult and stuff like that there. So we'll drill 2 3/16 holes, and keeping in mind that we're going to be putting a lanyard in, which is similar to a pin, but it's hollow, so we don't have to have the pin way back here. We'll move the pin up a little bit. If I'm doing 2 pins, I'll kind of center them in that direction there, and then, but the lanyard, we'll drill that one a little bit bigger, and then we'll yeah, so having a nice sharp drill bit is really nice. Imagine if this was hardened steel, it would be even more difficult to get through. So at this point in time, it's relatively soft. It's been worked. It's not as hard as it was, but that was a dull drill bit. And so I should also mention, if you're going to be trying this kind of stuff, do as I say, not as I do. It would have been better for me to put the markings on this side. That way, in case of the dreaded helicopter thing where the drill bit gets stuck in there and it spins around, it doesn't bring the sharper edge around. Even though it's not sharp, it's still sharper. So laying it this way with the rotation going that way would pull in that direction. Keeping it held tight, putting it in a vise would be probably a good idea. But as you're drilling, you'll start to get, if you drill a couple hundred holes, you'll figure out when that's getting ready to go through. The harder you press at that point, the more chances of it causing the helicopter, just easing up on it and letting it go through and doing itself now. So we're going to change over drill bits and we'll drill a hole in it. The next thing you'll see is we'll be doing the lanyard hole. We'll drill a little bit larger hole. We'll be heat treating. Okay, so Brendan reminded me that I've been lying to you guys and saying that we were going to the forge and do heat treating. We're actually going to do the file work next. So I do a simple little vine pattern. Kind of been doing it on a lot of different knives that I do. Some I do, some I don't. Some I put the jibbing on, which is kind of cool looking, functional. But the decorative file work also kind of acts like jibbing, so I put it in a very similar space where your thumb would go. And a similar act to it. So roughly in that general position there. Relatively easy, simple. Biggest thing you got to worry about is jumping and causing scratches other places. You want to bring that about almost 3/4 of the way across. 3/8 of the way across is probably good. Again, you could lay this all out, measuring exact and stuff like that there. Been doing it enough that kind of eyeballing it does it well for me. Okay, some of them we took a little bit further. I'll show you how to clean them up a little bit more. So the ones that I took a little bit further, we want to make sure that the other ones are equal distance a little bit further. And then we'll go to a triangle file and put the little point. So when you're doing the other part that kind of gives it that effect of a vine, there's a large section and a short section between holes. So if you look at these two holes, they're larger section. This is a smaller section between those two holes. We're going to put a nub there, a nub there, a nub there. Okay, so I kind of messed that one up a little bit as far as being able to get inside there and do the nubbing. So we'll fix it up now, and what I mean by fixing it up is we'll just reduce the height, which will bring them holes further apart. And now, as you can see in there, we brought them holes a little bit wider so we have more room to work in there. Now we'll have to even them up a little bit, so we'll go back to our round file, and then we'll go back to our nubbing them out a little bit, or straight lines, whatever you want to call that little piece that's in there. And we'll clean that one little round hole out a little bit. So I don't know how well you can see that in the camera, but it gives sort of like a vine shape to it. Kind of neat, unique, old school. They've been doing that for years. Now we'll go to heat treat. Okay, so this steel, whenever I forge, I do a normalizing. I'll do this 3 times. So we'll heat it up to non-magnetic. I didn't stick a magnet on it. After you've done it a couple times, you'll understand the colors and how the temperatures that those colors are. And when it becomes non-magnetic, it reaches that certain temperature color, and you'll see that. But we'll do this 3 times. It's called normalizing, and it relieves any of the stresses that we may have introduced into it in the forging process. For water jetted knives and for stock removal knives, we don't do the normalizing cycle. I actually found that brings out a little bit more stresses into them. That in the testing that we've done, there was some videos there where we've done some testing. I don't know where they ended up at. We'll see if we can get them onto the YouTube channel. But I found that not normalizing a blade that was already annealed and never introduced any heat stresses to it is actually a stronger blade. Okay, so the 3 normalizing cycles were done. I really didn't go through that too much. Basically what you do is you just heat it up 3 times to non-magnetic, let it soak there for a little bit, a couple of seconds, whatever, and then you let it cool to black. And then now what we're going to do now is we're going to do the actual quenching cycle, which will cause the steel to be extremely hard, and then we'll do a tempering cycle, which will bring it down. The tempering cycle is done in the oven. Not much to that there. It's just a matter of warming the oven up to 405, I like, and then leaving it in there for about an hour and 25 minutes, I found. You know, some people do the double hour, some people do an hour and a half, you know, and again, this is just from the testing that we did to give the hardness and the durability to the blade that I like. So we'll do the quench cycle now, and then we'll come back for cleanup, and we'll be putting a handle on it later then. Go a little further down in. Good. So also in the quenching process, you want to preheat your oil. You can actually do it with something like a candy thermometer type thing. I shoot for anywhere in between 140 and 180. Nice part about 1095 steel, it's very forgiving on the heat treating process. Now Brandon will leave that in there for a little bit. I like for it to go in until the redness goes away up in here. Once that's black there, you have that in a couple seconds or whatever to do straightening or whatever. I just put it in my straightening jig, and then we're ready for tempering. Clean up and then tempering. And then if you look down in through there, you can kind of see the tip. If it's in the middle, I'm happy. So after it comes out of the quench, you can see some color transformations where you'll get that gray look to it. That tells me that it's hard. but also the better way to do it is if a file skates off of it. So having a file, you can hear back here, we did not hit harden this part, because kind of hear that file sound to this sound. Here it's a little tinier sounding, a little sharper sounding versus flat. Now we'll clean that up a little bit and then we'll go to tempering. So for cleanup, after tempering, it'll have a straw color, so there'll be another cleanup after that even. But for the initial cleanup, I'll just do some light sanding on it with a 60 grit pad. Just get rid of some of the forge scale and stuff like that there off of it. And I can see in the future we'll probably want to get rid of that paint pen mark. Or we could use that to do some interesting stuff. The paint pen left a little bit of a mark on there, which is kind of interesting. But our handle will cover most of that, I hope. Okay, so it's been approximately an hour and 20 minutes, 25 minutes, give or take. Again, I do a 405 tempering, temperature 405. For about an hour and 20 minutes, 25 minutes, give or take. And like I said, through testing, that gives me the toughness of the knife blade that I like the best. So from here, I'm gonna do again, clean up. Lots of different ways out there to do it. I mean, I can go back to the grinder and grind it up and stuff like that there, but I'm just gonna have to clean those sander grinder marks up. So I just go to about 400 grit. Wet sanding seems to clean it up good, and then I go to, we'll see where we go to. I'll show you when we're done with that. I take a board, got a bucket underneath, catch my water and stuff. I lay the blade on there, clamp it fast. And then, like I said, a bucket of water keeps your paper wet and stuff like that there. Now, I'll wrap my paper in a sponge. That gives that a little bit of a flexibility to get into the curves and stuff like that there of the bevel. So some of the other products, or whatever you want to call it, sponges, block sanders and stuff like that there, pad sanding, just plain regular paper like I was using earlier there, seems to work well. I'm going to give this one a try, because this one actually came with some higher grits. This is 400 grit, 600 grit, 800 grit, 1000 grit. That is wet sand paper, so I'm going to try it wet sanding and see how that goes. And see if that's any better. Again, I'm not going for a mirror finish. I'm just going to clean up some of the tempering colors that were in there, the straw colors and stuff like that there. So I just want to give it a shine and go from there. So we'll see how this works. Okay, so that seems to work pretty well. Gets that tarnish look of the yellow straw look on it. So this is the side that we just did. And again, like I said, I like that brush look. It leaves some of the grinder marks on there. I don't like getting rid of my sharp bevels and stuff like that there. So if we go any further, we'll end up just washing all that out, and it just looks like one level thing on there, which some people like, some people don't. I don't. And again, the other side. So what we'll do is we'll do this side, we'll clean this side up as well, and then we'll come back when we're putting the handle on. Okay, so with cleanup, sanding done and stuff like that there, Brandon chose a leopard wood. We're going to do a scale on there. This one is actually thick enough that what I'll do is I'll end up cutting it in half then and use both sides for it. So I'm going to mark the one side and we'll cut that shape out where I want the handle to be. And we'll go saw that up. We've already done a video on handles, so I mean, same basic process. Marking where I want the little things to be as far as where I want to start my end of it, so I'll mark that there and then I'll cut that off as well. So we'll come back on when the handle's finished and stuff, because like I said, we've already done a video on handle. You can find it in the other side, and then we'll be back. Okay, so the handle is finished. We got the lanyard hole in it, brass ring inside, brass tube inside, and shining it up. Linseed oil seems to work best for the handles. I mean, handmade knife, it is not perfect, but it is good. Edge work. Forgot to put the maker's mark on it. Brandon might do that later. There you are. Finished hand forged knife. Thank you. Okay, so Brandon wanted me to do a sharpness test. There's always one spot on my arm that doesn't have much hair on it, so we'll roll around to that side. Not razor sharp, but sharp enough to shave bald spot. Okie dokie. Glamour shot, as Brandon calls it. Nice little knife, utility knife, small hunting knife. Pretty. We'll have a lanyard on. Great.